Welcome to session 4 of our study on the Book of Proverbs. In this session, we read and discuss chapters 12 through 15. We are in the second major unit of the book, and we'll see primarily two-line standalone proverbs that compare two polar opposite ideas: wise versus foolish, righteous versus wicked, industrious versus lazy, that sort of thing. And we'll get to those in a minute, but first, a word of prayer. O God, our Father, open our eyes and enlighten our minds as we study your word. So grant that our minds may know your truth and our hearts may feel your love, and then confirm and strengthen our wills that we may go out to live what we have learned. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. When we began chapter 10, we noticed a style change in the Proverbs we read. Instead of the father giving lectures to his son, or Lady Wisdom exclaiming her virtues, we began seeing mostly two-line proverbs that seem to stand on their own and appear largely disconnected from the proverbs that appeared immediately before or after them. This new arrangement also shifts responsibility for making sense of the proverbs from the father to the reader. If the book's aim, as was claimed, is to make wise people, then this shifting of responsibility makes sense. So stay with me for a minute here. This abrupt shift from the father doing the interpreting to the reader initiates a process of deliberation. We're the ones doing the deliberation. The readers now become participants in wisdom making themselves. Moreover, the apparent lack of prioritization among the proverbs requires us to examine and test each one, not only individually, but collectively. So ironically, the extent to which the Proverbs seem to be disconnected from any clear literary context increases the significance of the context that we can find. That is, as readers, we have to imagine appropriate contexts of use of a particular proverb based on our own experience. We can think of this as a literary mosaic or puzzle, where our job is to make sense of each of the individual proverbs in such a way that the entire picture makes sense. As we have already noticed, many of the individual proverbs we have seen don't seem to make a lot of sense at first glance. So that is going to be our challenge going forward. How can we make sense of these proverbs both individually and collectively? The proverbs from chapters 10 and 11, as well as those we will read today, are comprised predominantly of antithetical proverbs. Antithetical is a genre that continues the worldview of moral polarities and strongly qualified concepts established by the first 9 chapters. They compare the righteous and the wicked, or the industrious and the lazy, or the wise and the foolish, for example. There is a clear black and white comparison. In chapters 16 through 22, we will see a variety of genres. There will be synonymous proverbs, this is like that, or there will be better than proverbs, this is better than that. There will be rhetorical questions and some not good or not fitting proverbs. In the proverbs we start to read in the next session, there will be more nuance, more expression of relative values in comparison to the absolute values we have seen and will see mostly in this session. Today we're going to begin by reading the Proverbs from chapter 12. We'll read a few, then go back to single one or two out for further discussion. In a few instances today, and more often in the coming weeks, we'll see proverbs that seem to contradict each other occasionally. Again, we're going to read all the proverbs in these chapters. We are not going to try to discuss each one individually. There are a lot of proverbs here, so you certainly can go back and pick out some that sound interesting to you and try to figure out on your own what they're all about. You may have some footnotes or a commentary with your Bible that helps explain some of the stranger ones, and we can talk about any of these in our discussion on Sunday evening. We're going to start with the first 6 verses of chapter 12. Whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but those who hate to be rebuked are stupid. The good obtain favor from the Lord, but those who devise evil he condemns. No one finds security by wickedness, but the root of the righteous will never be moved. A good wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. The thoughts of the righteous are just. The advice of the wicked is treacherous. The words of the wicked are a deadly ambush, but the speech of the upright delivers them. So we notice that all of these have statements in the second line that is contrary to that statement that's in the first in some way. So we have loves discipline versus hates to be rebuked. Favor from the Lord versus condemnation. Wickedness versus righteousness. The good wife, the wife who brings shame. Just versus the treacherous. The words of the wicked versus speech of the upright. So let's look more closely at verses 1 and 4 from this group. Verse 1 says, whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but those who hate to be rebuked are stupid. Alter translates this as, who loves reproof loves knowledge, but who hates a rebuke is a brute. When we think about it, who loves being blamed for anything? We don't want to be called out for being wrong, but do we want to be corrected? If we're making the same mistake over and over again, don't we want to know about it so we don't keep doing it? We can often be appreciative, or maybe are occasionally appreciative, of what we call constructive criticism, as long as the emphasis is on the constructive part more than the criticism part. That's what this proverb seems to be getting at. Those who want to learn appreciate being corrected. Those who don't care whether they're right or not dislike any kind of criticism. So, verse 4, a good wife is the crown of her husband, but she who brings shame is like rottenness in his bones. Alter's translation is similar, a little different. A worthy woman is her husband's crown, but like rot in his bones, a shameful wife. In this verse, the antithesis of the two parts is different than what we would normally expect it to be. We might expect something like, a good wife is her husband's crown, but a bad wife is a pain in his butt. But the second half, or the second verset, moves from an adornment sitting on the head to something eating away at his bones from within, suggesting that the badness of a bad wife has more intense effect on the negative side than the goodness of a good wife has on the positive side. It doesn't seem to be an even trade here. In addition, the phrase shameful wife is held back until the very end so that it becomes sort of a punch word in Alter's translation. Let's go on and read verses 7 through 12. The wicked are overthrown and are no more, but the house of the righteous will stand. One is commended for good sense, but a perverse mind is despised. Better to be despised and have produce than to be self-important and lack food. The righteous know the needs of their animals, but the mercy of the wicked is cruel. Those who till their land will have plenty of food, but those who follow worthless pursuits have no sense. The wicked covet the proceeds of the wickedness, but the root of the righteous bears fruit. So verse 9 says, better to be despised and have produce than to be self-important and lack food. Alter's translation is, better a scorned man who has a slave than one who fancies himself honored and lacks bread. Yoder says, translates it this way, better to be of little account and have a servant than the boaster who lacks bread. Public acclaim for this proverb is not the goal. Anonymity and self-sufficiency are better than putting on airs and living beyond one's means. That's what this proverb is trying to tell us. We also note that the formulation of this proverb is X is better than Y. We're not looking at absolutes here. The genre of this one is not antithetical, where we are comparing exact opposites. What we said earlier was the predominant form of proverb in the chapters we're looking at today. This is different. It's one of the exceptions. So in verse 10, we have the righteous know the needs of their animals, but the mercy of the wicked is cruel. So this one is also a little different. The righteous man is so compassionate that he has an intuitive sense of the needs and discomforts of his animals. But the wicked person, on the other hand, is so utterly devoid of compassion that even what he attempts to show as an expression of mercy turns out to be cruel. Let's read verses 13 through 18. The evil are ensnared by the transgression of their lips, but the righteous escape from trouble. From the fruit of the mouth one is filled with good things, and manual labor has its reward. Fools think their own way is right, but the wise listen to advice. Fools show their anger at once, but the prudent ignore an insult. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence, but a false witness speaks deceitfully. Rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. So we're just going to look at verse 18 in this one. Rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The image of malicious speech as a cutting sword is somewhat conventional, but the contrast with the healing tongue of the wise is quite striking here. It is not just that the words of the wise do no damage, they go beyond that. They go to healing. We're going to read verses 19 through 24 now. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. Deceit is in the mind of those who plan evil, but those who counsel peace have joy. No harm happens to the righteous, but the wicked are filled with trouble. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord, but those who act faithfully are his delight. One who is clever conceals knowledge, but the mind of a fool broadcasts folly. The hand of the diligent will rule, while the lazy will be put to forced labor. So let's look at verse 23 here. One who is clever conceals knowledge, but the mind of a fool broadcasts folly. Alter's translation is a little bit similar. A shrewd man conceals what he knows, but the heart of the dullard proclaim folly. We might wonder why concealing knowledge is considered to be a good thing, but the issue here is discretion. It is discretion here that is considered to be a cardinal virtue. It isn't that it's a good thing to withhold knowledge. It is rather that just because you know something doesn't mean you always have to tell everybody what you know. The wise person uses discretion in what he says. Let's go on with verses 25 through 28. Anxiety weighs down the human heart, but a good word cheers it up. The righteous are released from misfortune, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. The lazy do not roast their game, but the diligent obtain precious wealth. In the path of righteousness there is life. In walking its path there is no death. So verse 27 sounds kind of interesting. The lazy do not roast their game, but the diligent obtain precious wealth. The idea here may be that the slacker will never enjoy the fruits of his highly dubious labor, but apparently the Masoretic text from which this was translated appears to be a bit shaky. The verb is hapax legomenon, so that's Hebrew, that's the Hebrew word. And this is the only place it appears in the Old Testament, so our commentators are not sure exactly what it means. There's nothing else to compare it to. The order of the words in the second line is apparently also a bit uncertain. Alter translate that second line, but a man's wealth is precious gold. Yoder suggests it means the wealth of a man is precious, diligent. Let's go on to chapter 13. This chapter emphasizes again the importance of discipline and the importance of instruction. Most of these proverbs are antithetical. Again, all but I think verse 14. We start with a silent son at home learning from his father, verses 1 through 10. So it's kind of what we had in the first chapter of the book. Similar. So we start with verse 1. A wise child loves discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. From the fruit of their words, good persons eat good things, but the desire of the treacherous is for wrongdoing. Those who guard their mouths preserve their lives. Those who open wide their lips come to ruin. The appetite of the lazy craves and gets nothing, while the appetite of the diligent is richly supplied. The righteous hate falsehood, but the wicked act shamefully and disgracefully. Righteousness guards one whose way is upright, but sin overthrows the wicked. Some pretend to be rich, yet have nothing. Others pretend to be poor, yet have great wealth. Wealth is a ransom for the person's life, but a poor person pays no attention to a rebuke. The light of the righteous rejoices, but the lamp of the wicked goes out. By insolence the empty-headed person makes strife, but wisdom is with those who take advice. In verse 3, we have those who guard their mouths preserve their lives. Those who open wide their lips come to ruin. Talking can get you into serious trouble, so the prudent man keeps his mouth shut. In verse 7, it's not immediately clear which one is the good guy. Let's read that one again. Some pretend to be rich, yet have nothing. Others pretend to be poor, yet have great wealth. So probably this proverb is merely intending to give us a warning not to be taken in by appearances. In the economic realm, some people are not what they seem to be. Just be aware of that. That's perhaps the point of this one. Let's read verses 11 through 20. Wealth hastily gotten will dwindle, but those who gather little by little will increase it. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, but a desire fulfilled is a tree of life. Those who despise a word bring destruction on themselves, but those who respect a command will be rewarded. The teaching of the wise is a fountain of life, so that one may avoid the snares of death. Good sense wins favor, but the way of the faithless is their ruin. The clever do all things intelligently, but a fool displays folly. A bad messenger brings trouble, but a faithful envoy healing. Poverty and disgrace are for the ones who ignore instruction, but one who heeds reproof is honored. A desire realized is sweet to the soul, but to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools suffers harm. We go down to verse 19. It says, a desire realized is sweet to the soul, but to turn away from evil is an abomination to fools. The Hebrew word used here literally means throat. So a desire realized is sweet to the throat. Alter translates it as sweet to the palate. Yoder translates it as fulfilled longing, thus taste pleasing. Let's read the last 5 verses of chapter 13 now. Misfortune pursues sinners, but prosperity rewards the righteous. The good leave an inheritance to their children's children, but sinners' wealth is laid up for the righteous. The field of the poor may yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice. Those who spare the rod hate their children, but those who love them are diligent to discipline them. The righteous have enough to satisfy their appetite, but the belly of the wicked is empty. So let's look at verse 23. The field of the poor may yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice. So this is a tough one. The proverb is somewhat cryptic. It might be a worldly observation on the contradictory nature of reality. Destitute people have fields from which an abundant yield could be harvested, but they can't figure out how to do it. Others are suddenly destroyed by disease or disaster for no good reason. In some ways, it sounds much more like something from Ecclesiastes. Michael F. Fox adds a line to his translation. He adds, the great devour the tillage of the poor. That's just how it is. The rich get richer. That obviously doesn't line up with all the other proverbs that we say, where if you work hard, you're diligent, then you're going to be successful. You're going to get rich. But Yoder suggests that not explaining the source of injustice intensifies the powerlessness of the poor. So figure out how to interpret that yourself, I guess. In verse 24, we recognize spare the rod and spoil the child. Verse 24 said, those who spare the rod hate their children, but those who love them are diligent to discipline them. In chapter 14, we focus again on the wise and the foolish. We see a lot of the proverbs in here are going to be about the wise and the foolish. Not all of them, but many of them. You may have noticed that many of the proverbs in chapter 12 and 13 seem to be somehow related to those immediately before them and after them. Not all of them, but several times we've seen that. In chapter 14, the majority of the proverbs appear to be totally unrelated to the proverbs adjacent to them, although there are a couple of pairs in here thematically. So we'll read the first 7 verses of chapter 14. The wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. Those who walk uprightly fear the Lord, but one who is devious in conduct despises him. The talk of fools is a rod for their backs, but the lips of the wise preserve them. Where there are no oxen, there is no grain. Abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. The faithful witness does not lie, but a false witness breathes out lies. A scoffer seeks wisdom in vain, but knowledge is easy for one who understands. Leave the presence of a fool, for there you do not find words of knowledge. Verse 1, the wise woman builds her house, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. You notice that the first half of this verse looks exactly like the first verse of chapter 9, where we had Lady Wisdom throwing a banquet and Lady Folly throwing a banquet. This may just be a coincidence, but it jumps out as kind of unexpected. At any rate, this proverb tells us that wisdom constructs, folly tears down. Verse 4, where there are no oxen, there is no grain. Abundant crops come by the strength of the ox. Your manger may remain clean of grain when you have no oxen to feed, and maybe clean of other things. But it is the strength of the ox, however he dirties up the manger in the barn, that enables you to reap a harvest. Nice to have a clean barn, but it's also nice to have a harvest, and you might need the ox for that. Let's read 8 through 14. It is the wisdom of the clever to understand where they go, but the folly of fools misleads. Fools mock at the guilt offering, but the upright enjoy God's favor. The heart knows its own bitterness, and no stranger shares its joy. The house of the wicked is destroyed, but the tent of the upright flourishes. There is a way that seems right to a person, but its end is the way to death. Even in laughter the heart is sad, and the end of joy is grief. The perverse get what their ways deserve, and the good what their deeds deserve. In verse 14, the one we just read, the perverse get what their ways deserve, and the good what their deeds deserve. There doesn't seem to be a lot of opposition here between the first and the second. Both evil man and the good man live with the consequences of what they've done. Let's go on with verses 15 through 21. The simple believe everything, but the clever consider their steps. The wise are cautious and turn away from evil, but the fool throws off restraint and is careless. One who is quick-tempered acts foolishly, and the schemer is hated. The simple are adorned with folly, but the clever are crowned with knowledge. The evil bow down before the good, the wicked at the gates of the righteous. The poor are disliked even by their neighbors, but the rich have many friends. Those who despise their neighbors are sinners, but happy are those who are kind to the poor. Verse 19 says, the evil bow down before the good, the wicked at the gates of the righteous. That's kind of maybe difficult to understand what that's about. The proverb is probably saying that the evil court the righteous. They bow down to them at the entrance to their homes. Verses 22 through 28. Do not those who plan evil err? Those who plan good find loyalty and faithfulness. In all toil there is profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. The crown of the wise is their wealth, but folly is the garland of fools. A truthful witness saves lives, but one who utters lies is a betrayer. In the fear of the Lord, one has strong confidence, and one's children will have a refuge. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, so that one may avoid the snares of death. The glory of a king is a multitude of people. Without people, a prince is ruined. The last verse, 28, the glory of a king is a multitude of people. Without people, a prince is ruined. This says merely that a ruler cannot be a ruler without people in his kingdom. He's therefore ruined. Let's go into 29 through 35. Whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but one who has a hasty temper exalts folly. A tranquil mind gives life to the flesh, but jealousy makes the bones rot. Those who oppose the poor insult their Maker, but those who are kind to the needy honor him. The wicked are overthrown by their own evil doing, but the righteous find a refuge in their integrity. Wisdom is at home in the mind of one who has understanding, but it is not known in the heart of fools. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. A servant who deals wisely has the king's favor, but his wrath falls on one who acts shamefully. Verse 30, a tranquil mind gives life to the flesh, but jealousy makes the bones rot. Literally, the translation should say, a healing heart should give life to the flesh or to the body. Presumably, the heart is healing because it feels something like equanimity, in contrast to corrosive envy in the second half of the verse, but jealousy makes the bones rot. Verse 33, wisdom is at home in the mind of the one who has understanding, but it is not known in the heart of fools. The proverb ties wisdom and understanding, but wisdom is certainly not found around fools. Chapter 15 marks the end of the first half of the Proverbs of Solomon. That is the second unit of this book. In this chapter, we start to see more diversity in the genre of Proverbs. There are a number of Yahweh, or the Lord, Proverbs in chapter 15. We've seen a few of those in 14. We're going to see several more in this one. We also still find the antithetical Proverbs, the polar opposites, but they're less dominant than in the past few chapters we've been reading. We begin reading verses 1 through 9. A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouths of fools pour out folly. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. A gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. A fool despises a parent's instruction, but the one who heeds admonition is prudent. In the house of the righteous there is much treasure, but trouble befalls the income of the wicked. The lips of the wise spread knowledge, not so the minds of fools. The sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but the prayer of the upright is his delight. The way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves the one who pursues righteousness. So in verse 3, we read the first Yahweh proverb, the first mention of the Lord in this chapter. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, keeping watch on the evil and the good. Verse 4 says, a gentle tongue is a tree of life, but perverseness in it breaks the spirit. Alter translates this proverb as healing speech is a tree of life, but perverse speech breaks the spirit. Healing words restore, harmful words cut down, leaving one in misery. That's our message, I think, in this one. Verse 8 tells us the sacrifice of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but prayer of the upright is his delight. This proverb deals with worship of God and tells us that any sacrifice of the wicked is not looked on favorably by the Lord. Verse 9 is paired with verse 8 that we just discussed about insincere worship. Verse 9 says, the way of the wicked is an abomination to the Lord, but he loves the one who pursues righteousness. This proverb expands from worship to one's path in life. God loves those who have chosen the path of righteousness. Let's go to verses 10 through 18. There is severe discipline for one who forsakes the way. One who hates a rebuke will die. Sheol and Abanon lie open before the Lord. How much more human hearts? Scoffers do not like to be rebuked. They will not go to the wise. A glad heart makes a cheerful countenance, but by sorrow of heart the spirit is broken. The mind of one who has understanding seeks knowledge, but the mouths of fools feed on folly. All the days of the poor are hard, but a cheerful heart has a continual feast. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than a great treasure and trouble with it. Better is a dinner of vegetables where love is than a fatted ox and hatred with it. Those who are hot-tempered stir up strife. Those who are slow to anger calm contention. Verse 11 refers to Sheol and Abaddon. Sheol and Abaddon are both names for the underworld. We may be more familiar with perdition than Abaddon, but some of the translations also use perdition instead. They both refer to hell, or a place where the unrepentant go after death. Sheol and Abaddon lie open before the Lord. How much more human hearts? So the vast depths of the realm of death lie transparently exposed to the Lord's scrutiny. But his scrutiny can penetrate the human heart with incomparably greater ease. It's easier for God, for Lord, to see into the human heart than it is to see into the realms of death. We notice in verses 16 and 17 the better than type of proverb. Better is a little with the fear of the Lord than a great treasure and trouble with it. Better is a dinner of vegetables where love is than a fatted ox with hatred in it. Let's read 19 through 27. The way of the lazy is overgrown with thorns, but the path of the upright is a level highway. A wise child makes a glad father, but the foolish despise their mothers. Folly is a joy to one who has no sense, but a person of understanding walks straight ahead. Without counsel, plans go wrong, but with many advisers, they succeed. To make an apt answer is a joy to anyone, and a word in season, how good it is. For the wise, the path of life leads upward, in order to avoid Sheol below. The Lord tears down the house of the proud, but maintains the widow's boundaries. Evil plans are abomination to the Lord, but gracious words are pure. Those greedy for unjust gain make trouble for their households, but those who hate bribes will live. Let's look at verse 20. A wise child makes a glad father, but the foolish despise their mothers. To make these versettes parallel, this can be interpreted not that the foolish child deliberately despises his mother because he is a fool, but that his being a fool has the effect of humiliating his mother. Verse 26, evil plans are abomination to the Lord, but gracious words are pure. From the Masoretic text, the second line may be translated as, and the sweet sayings are pure, which is quite similar to what the NRSV translation we just quoted says, but gracious words are pure. The Septuagint, on the other hand, gives us, but the sayings of the pure are sweet. So we may read that as evil plans are an abomination to the Lord, but the sayings of the pure are sweet. Now let's read 28 through the end of the chapter. The mind of the righteous ponder how to answer, but the mouth of the wicked pours out evil. The Lord is far from the wicked, but he hears the prayer of the righteous. The light of the eyes rejoices the heart, and the good news refreshes the body. The ear that heeds wholesome admonition will lodge among the wise. Those who ignore instruction despise themselves, but those who heed admonition gain understanding. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility goes before honor. Let's look at that last verse. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility goes before honor. This parable is in line with several others that claim fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. We've seen that several times before. We're going to see it again. So here we end chapter 15. This should give us plenty to think about for the coming week. You can try to memorize all those Proverbs. Again, on Sunday evening, we can discuss any of the Proverbs from these 4 chapters that you want to, not just the few that we singled out to discuss in this video. In session 5, we will discuss chapters 16 through 20. We're still within the second major unit of the Book of Proverbs, Proverbs of Solomon. We'll still see 2-line proverb style that we saw this week, but with more variety in the genre of Proverbs, more grouping or pairing of similar Proverbs together. Until then, have a good week, and we'll see you Sunday.